One last time, let's hear it for the Lean Into Art Cast, the show where a couple of visual storytellers get together, take a walk, engage with a topic, battle a topic, think about a topic, play with a topic, and then, try to think hard about what we were thinking about when we were making the topic, or when we were engaging with the topic. We think hard about visual storytelling, so you will too. My name is Jersey Drozd, cartoonist and teaching artist, and the other fella is...
Hello, I am Rob Stenzinger. I am a coder and designer, and it's amazing we've been doing this podcast so long, and then this whole topic thing. Nothing but looking back at a big bunch of time.
Yeah, so yes, we talk about visual storytelling on the show, like making comics, making video games, communicating ideas, teaching, presentation, public speaking, trying to change hearts and minds through the combination of word and image and even sound sometimes, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, this is, we believe a lot in the whole process of, on your projects, you will likely wear a lot of hats. You will likely need to be adapting and picking and choosing which ones you might work with someone else on, which ones you wouldn't, or have certain situations where you would or wouldn't. And that's a process of both learning and teaching when you go through the experience and then dig down and pick it apart and share it, which is a huge part of this practice for us, which is Lean Into Art. And a lot of the folks who are in the community tend to do that as well.
Right, and so that's a preface to say that, every 2 weeks we come up with another topic to chew on the show. And I don't remember which of us came up with the idea of, hey, I know, the last show of the year, we typically do some kind of topic surrounding the idea of reflecting on what's just happened in the last year and planning what we want to do the next year.
Mm-hmm.
And one of us said, or maybe both of us said at the same time, who knows anymore, why don't we do the last 10 years of our lives? And we'll try to fit that into a 2-hour show.
Well, and that's the premise was, I think, roughly, okay, on the social medias, a lot of memes pop up. There's a recent meme about, here's me at the beginning of 2016, and here's me at the end. But also, people have been sharing at the same time because of, I don't know, well-rounded number thing. Here's me in 2006, and then here's me in 2016.
Right.
And all of a sudden, intermingling all this stuff, and then... a topic jumped out of the soup.
Yeah, and it was you who said, and then this part I do remember clearly, is you said at some point in a creative journey, you'll have a decade of work to look back on. And that's where we can actually, use our privilege in the situation, being, of a certain age, having some decades behind us now, that we can do that. We can model that activity. So like for the person who's maybe just diving in and starting an exploration of visual storytelling for themselves. What can you expect after what adds up after 10 years, and how do you pick it apart? How do you collect that information? How do you comb through it, and how do you process it after the fact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a linear progression? Is it just I do this job and then I get a better job, and then I get a better job, and I get a raise, and I get a corner office, and now I'm done? Or are there sidetracks? Are there like weird little diversions? Are there parts where you think you were doing this, but you were really doing that? Lots of surprises happen as you're trying not to drown, right?
Yeah, it's. I think it'll be fun to explore the narratives of us as we recall them, and us as we see them when we look back now. And this is an exercise that's valuable, even if it is only 1 year that you're looking at. That's not that has very tangible benefit. But then there is something different when you scale, when you say times 10 instead of just 1 year. What if it's 10 years?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? And all the things you said with gathering it and finding the meaning in it.
And I do want to point people at the top of this one, in case people are listening or watching this after the fact, after the live stream. If you want to stop and get a preface for this one, I would highly recommend you check out Rob and Kate Stenzinger's excellent podcast, Art and Science Punks, and that's at artsciencepunks.fireside.fm. The latest episode at the time of this recording is Emotions and Data for Goal Planning, Part 1, Reflection. And it's you and Kate breaking down sort of like a a prologue to this very topic of reflecting on goal planning. And this is a part one of a series that you're going to be doing with her, where
Mm-hmm.
you guys are going to talk about the planning that you guys do for your projects at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for mentioning the show. Very kind of you. As far as I'm glad you're digging it, and yeah, it is great to hear feedback and whatnot. But that is a process that we embrace every year, and I have a lot of affection for it, even though it can be difficult at times. And even though that there are folks that I deeply respect and care about their thoughts and listen to different podcasts where they share their thoughts. And you get to the end of the year, and some folks don't have a great opinion of the whole planning process, whatever, kind of conflated into only um, New Year's resolution, wish making type of activities. And maybe it relates to that, but there can be a lot more. And so I think it's also a good time to present it counter perspectives. And this is fun because what this is yet a different take on it. Though that throwing the decade at the whole picture, I think changes things, and we'll see how that goes.
I think we will. So yes, so the first half of the show, we're going to be talking about the last 10 years of our personal journeys in art, and going through the highs and lows of it and seeing what we find there. And then in the second half of the show, we're going to pick it apart and talk about, what do we do with this information? How do we process it? And how does that all add up to what we plan on doing for 2017? But before we do that, Rob, we've got to thank our sponsors. We have sponsors for this show, and the sponsors are us.
Yes.
So we do that. We make this show and we distribute it and put it on the internet for free, and we are really glad that people enjoy it. But we do other things to pay the bills, and we hope that a way for that you can engage with our stuff more deeply would be to participate or consume or purchase things that we make. And the thing that I make right now that I'd like to make some noise about is a comic called Boulder and Fleet Adventures for Hire, which is at boulderandfleet.com. It's currently updating once a week at boulderandfleet.com, or on Instagram, username Boulder and Fleet, or on Twitter, username Boulder and Fleet, or on Tapastic. Just do a search for the series Boulder and Fleet. What is it? It's animals doing people things. A bear and a bird go from town to town, finding themselves getting embroiled in other people's troubles and trying to solve the problems peacefully. And in the current story, there is this stag beetle in a cafe who's being bullied by this really mean chicken. And we've just gotten to the part where Boulder is going to intervene. But how is he going to intervene? He's going to go make friends, because that's what a bear with super strength would do. Is there going to be a fight? Is there going to be tables getting knocked over? Maybe. But yeah, it's a project that's near and dear to my heart, and there's ways to support it financially. You can support it on Patreon, or you can get the comics in print. You can purchase them on Etsy, or you can purchase PDF downloads of them. But really, the main thing I want people to interact with it and read it and share it. So please go to
Where's a convenient place to find this Etsy link?
Oh, tinyastronaut.com.
Okay, thank you.
But it's also linked in the sidebar at boulderandfleet.com. But thank you for making me say that out loud. You got to say something out loud, Rob, about This Panda Needs You.
So, even though I may speak loud and in an excited manner about This Panda Needs You, it's a very mellow game. And it's all about pattern matching and stacking shapes in this physics-based puzzle where you are here to help this little panda who comes across a pattern of shapes and a troublesome cloud. It's kind of a cute cloud. It doesn't seem to be mean, but it just shows up and knocks them all down every time, right? And so your job is to just keep helping this panda put those blocks back to the way they were, and then encounter the next puzzle. And there's like over 50 puzzles, and this is a game that's it's available on iOS, on your whatever size device, iPhone, iPad. And I've seen anyone from of 2 years of age to 22, 42 on up play this and enjoy it. And you can find out more about it by searching for it in the iTunes App Store for This Panda, or you can go to this-panda.com.
There's a handy link right there that says buy now in the iTunes App Store, and there's that cloud and the panda right there underneath. But if you show up to these shows, to the live streams, or watch it on YouTube after the fact, and you're like, but I'm really here for the way you guys think about things. Well, we have products for that too, and that's at leanintoart.com/workshops, where you can find videos that we've recorded, workshop videos, and these are things that we've used in classrooms. We're going to talk about the development of some of these workshops, I think, in our 10-year journey today. But yeah, Comics Fundamentals is a series that I've been teaching for years at the Ann Arbor Art Center. I've been teaching it around, actually, a lot of the lessons in there were taught, I can honestly say, around the country. I taught them in Utah, Washington, D.C., Toronto, New York. So wow, it's a bit of a traveled series of workshops. But these are all at a price of your choosing. So you can get Comics Fundamentals or FATAM, a detailed exploration of comic sound theory and design, Storyteller's UI tools, turning jokes into comics, laughing Yeti monkey spaghetti, and making video games from your creator-owned comics, all at leanintoart.com/workshops. Price of your choosing. You decide how much they're worth to you. You could put a price of free if you want to, and then just give us a tip after the fact. Either way, thank you guys so much for everybody who has interacted with the stuff that we make. So, ready to dig in and go on the ground?
Yeah.
All right, so let's do something intense. This is going to be tough. 10 years. I can tell you, dear listener who's listening or watching, that Rob and I both found ourselves spending a lot of time on the notes for this song. And that's not to be like, oh, it's Mother's Day and nobody remembered. That's just to say, like, digging through 10 years of material, boy, it was a lot more challenging than I thought it would be, Rob.
Yeah, it turns out it's 10 years of data is a lot of data. You can do a lot of stuff in one day and then think about that over a week and a month and a year. And right, it gets kind of wild to look back and find ways to just get on the path to be gathering it and mining your own experience.
Now, this is where I had a little bit of naive hubris because I was like, oh, how hard can it be? But you knew because you did last year, and we haven't talked about this in a while, but you did an experience inventory to reflect on the year past. This was, you posted this on January 11th of this year. So I wonder if you could just briefly, and we'll link to this in the show notes, but I wonder if you could just briefly describe what this experience was that you went through, building an experience inventory.
It's not dissimilar to what I went through for this project. It just had a little more granularity in the data. So I wanted to look at what were the highs and lows of 2015. Where were they? Would they pop up in a surprise way? Was something that was a low for me as in an emotional way? Was it really a success from an audience perspective? And then what do I think of that in the end, right? And so it was about digging through things, anything from like email, my calendar, Evernote, files on my computer and whatever, to be recreating of like, oh, this is what I did, in each month. And both in any sort of commitment, family, primary professional commitment, side projects, everything. And
wow.
So, yeah, it was a lot of data. So that anything that I could capture from one of those projects is an experience, right? But then I captured data about the experience of like, what was its impact on me? How did I feel about it emotionally? How did what could I observe that it had an impact on others? What did it cost me anything monetarily? And what did I earn from it as well? So I can think about it from an impact on myself and others, and also a financial perspective.
Let me read this. This is from your blog post. It took about 1.5 calendar weeks of this capture work for 20 minutes to an hour a day to get the amount of data that felt like enough. I gathered 240 experiences and captured 19 answers/observations about each experience, a total of 4,560 points of data.
It's an experiment. Yeah.
I wanted to use this as a framework to like see how we can explore the same thing with our 10 years, because like as you ask yourself some questions, information about the experience. What did you do? What did you experience? When did it happen? Where did it take place? What life role or purpose did it fall under? What project was it? What was the topic? What effect did it have on you? Right? How do you feel about the experience overall? Rating 1 to 5. How do you feel about the effort? How easy or difficult was it to produce? What effect did it have on others? Right? Did it help you connect with other people? Was it What were other people's reaction to it? How much reaction was there overall? Right? Would you do this again? Who did you connect with? Right? I think that's a really
Mm.
good framework for approaching what we're going to do now. Right?
Hmm. That's right. I forgot about the connecting, especially there, because it was interesting that I mean, finding a community to serve that I care about, using tools and methods I believe in to engage in a sustainable trade,
There's the
is
coat of
sort of a
arms.
there you go, as you coined that, and that's something I'm always on the lookout for and trying to tune into. And it's easy to miss, like, oh, wait a minute, going to that one event helped me connect with these people I love to work with. This is awesome, and then I don't want to forget that is part of the point.
Right. Yeah, I've got some observations in that respect as well. All right,
Mm-hmm.
so do we want to just dive in and like sort of like blast through the 10 years? Do we want Okay, question. We did not discuss this before we started, and perhaps we
Mm-hmm.
should have. Do we want to go my 2006, your 2006, back and forth, or do we want to go
Mm-hmm.
just down on a straight line for each of us and then discuss and compare afterwards?
Mm. At this point, I'm asking myself, what would VH1 do when covering years of
Behind
music,
the music?
right? Behind the music. I'm guessing we would line up on year and
Okay.
just go back and forth,
Back and forth, where we were in these different years. Cool. And then
and
we'll
then
get
we should react as we go.
All
See
right.
what happens. All right.
And we're gonna have to squint test this because there is no way we're gonna fit all this stuff obviously, into a
Mm.
2 hour show. And we're already like 15, 16 minutes in. Um, all right, so 2006. Where was I in 2006?
Mm.
I was actually coming off of a lot of effort in 2006. I felt like I was in a point of increased capacity because I finished serializing. I was wrapping up the front Rebirth, my first big webcomic project, which I started at the beginning of 2003. So 3 years of serializing that, what page a week.
Mm.
And as a sub note, I originally intended on continuing that series. Like when I wrapped it up, and I didn't have a script for another story, but I felt really good about the strength of like what I had done. So I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
just proclaimed on the website like, check back in the next coming months. There'll be a new story coming. Like, what it is, I don't know, but we'll find out. At the same time, I also finished serializing The Replacements, another graphic novel I worked on with a friend, Sarah Turner. Um, I did my first, published work for like an educational publisher, the Calamity Kids for Glencoe McGraw-Hill. Had an art exhibition, and you know, I was also putting my freelance career back together because I had like a big thing that happened like a couple years before where like a big client kind of stiffed me for a lot of money and it kind of sent me into a little bit of a financial spiral. Um, and then, you know, I guess that's those are the big ones, the highs and the lows. Feeling good about a lot of capacity, but then also like trying to run around looking for work at the same
It
time.
sounds like 2006 was in the middle of the action for you.
It was, yeah. You were hitting me like right at like the beginning of Act Three of like a period of my life.
Hmm. All right. I would say mine was in Act One,
Mm,
where
hear
I
about it.
was. I hit. I. How many acts are we talking about here? Because basically, I closed. I ended one play and I started another play in 2006.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'd worked, about over 9 years in the financial industry. Had a lot of adventures, which may sound funny or surprising to some folks who listen to this, but I was much like who I am now. I wore a lot of hats, and I was very lucky, and I was able to work on a lot of different interesting projects. I built like three different pretty big systems. I was proud of being part of. Dealt with the whole ending of those systems too, and like how I make things out of love, and having to set them aside was pretty hard. But then where to the extent where I'm like, I think I'm ready to try this thing somewhere else. And so I ended that. I didn't know. I assumed I was just not going to retire there, but I mean, I'd been there a good chunk of time, right?
Mm,
And so that that's it was roughly like 10 years ago this month where I stopped that and I went independent. and my intent was to then build my own software and do user experience consulting, TBD, right?
Mm.
Maybe it would be I make utilities and games, who knows, right? But I had a bit saved up and I was ready to rock, figuring out my own thing.
Wow. It was like a courageous step forward.
Well, yes, mixed bag. I felt it was time, yet I don't know. Like you're never prepared for the next thing until you get into it and face the thing. And if
Right.
you're that prepared, then you probably didn't pick. Depending on your motivations, that could be perfect. You're like, yes, I knew all the variables, and this is awesome. And for me, I knew very few variables and was just wanting to try
Mm-hmm.
more than yeah, I knew some of the independent things. My whole career started from doing independent consulting, yet it had been a while, and this was and so the other thing was I had a long term game project that came to an end. That that was it had its ups and downs, and I learned a ton through it about times when I just myself as a collaborator, I can be, I don't know, not be as goal driven and make hard choices as I need to be at times, right? So then I hopefully learned from that, and that was a big thing because yeah, Jinhanu was actually in the 2004 Independent Game Developer Festival lineup. It didn't make it to the end, right? But Jinhanu was something I worked on with a variety of people that I care about and respect, and it was hard to table that project. But
Wow.
that was 2006.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about that year because like we both have like a little bit of history that kind of leads into that year, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so when I was talking about this increased capacity that I was finding as a cartoonist, it was also like coming off of. I mean, the short version is that I had a client, a freelance client I'd been working for since like 2002, and I was ready to move away. I was moving to Texas, and I was like, oh, I'm not gonna do much work for you guys anymore. And they wined and dined me. They like took me out to lunch and everything with like all the art directors, and they're like, we really want you to stay, and here's like a big number of money that we're gonna give you to work on these projects. And it was like enough to be like basically my full time gig, being like a independent contractor for these guys. And then like I moved, got an apartment, setting up with my wife there, and then the company folded and like they just like went away, they vanished.
Oh my
So
word.
it's like I banked everything on this one thing, and like that, so like 2006 was me like sort of trying to piece everything back together. So while it was like on an upswing in one way, it was also a downswing in another.
Mm-hmm.
2007, uh so that was when I started working on Sugary Cereals, which was, for those who don't know, it was an anthology project where I connected with a whole mess of cartoonists who were doing what they call all ages comics, comics that kids can enjoy and adults can enjoy. And it was this very scheduled project where it's like I had it worked out to where it was going to be like a year and 1 month worth of publishing, where every month we're going to have a 24-page comic produced consisting of either 8 or 16-page stories. So it'd be like a 16-page story with an 8-page story, or 3 8-page stories, or two 16. I don't know. I remember how it all worked. 16 in a 4? No, it'd be a 16 and 8. Anyway,
Hmm.
and so it would update every weekday for 24 days every month, plus like a cover, plus like extra feature stuff. And so I walked into it like all bright eyed, like this is gonna be so much fun. Oh, and the theme of the series was comics constructed like Saturday morning cartoons from when we were kids, where there's a 3 act structure. You have a first cliffhanger, and then after the commercial break, you solve the story, or you have 2 cliffhangers if you have 3 acts. And everybody was to come up with brand new concepts that were like, imagine if you could make a cartoon show when you were a kid, or like the kind when you were a kid, but you could make it now for your younger self. What would you make?
Hmm.
So like there was Mark Rudolph came up with the Galactic League of Marshals. Sarah Turner and I came up with the Equalizers of the Divide. Mark and I came up with the Switch Runners. There was a comic called Daring Dodo, Super Pet Mojo, Imaginary Friends Forever. It was a really fun project, but it was way more intense than I ever thought it was going to be. Scheduling that, running the website, trying to get the promotion out, and then making sure that everybody was delivering their stuff, and like also contributing work of my own to it, and then writing the letters column and designing the covers and designing the books and getting them in print in time. Oh my gosh, that was a lot of my 2007. That's also where I got my start teaching. Worked with a project called the Art Served Michigan Literacy Arts Comic Book Project, where I visited 10 Detroit public schools over the course of, I don't remember, 2 semesters or something like that, teaching kids how to make comics. That was my first time doing real teaching. Started Art and Story that year, and with Mark Rudolph. And those are the big ones? Yeah. Yeah, and then I was just, doing more freelance work. What about your 2007, Rob?
Wow. Your 2007 is pretty pretty wild, man. Let's see. So I did start my my consulting and did a little bit of work here and there for a nonprofit, and did some game design consulting for a large university that made me sign something that said I could never say who they are. It's fun. NDAs, everybody. So, and then I also had this. I had this capacity, and I was looking where to spend it, because I had the gigs, but I had actually some good time between them and whatnot, and it was a good rhythm where I'd done some research on like, well, I know what I want to use to build an app. I think I want to build an app first. I don't know why. I was taking a break from gaming because the prior big thing, and I was realizing how much Evite was bothering me at the time. So I built a tool to make it so you don't have to use something like Evite, and it was called It's My Party. And what it is like a standalone app that acts as sort of like your extra email client, and you can send out invitations and surveys through your own email, and people could respond, and then this would actually parse the responses and collect the data.
Wow.
And yeah, it was working pretty well, pretty reliably. I had some beta testers and whatnot, and that's when it launched, is in 2007.
And is there any reason why this didn't go any farther than that? Are there a lot of reasons?
This is a great question. Shall I go first in 2008 to answer your question?
Yes, let's go there.
Okay. Well, after like a good 7 to 9 months working on this, it was apparent the amount of nuanced cases and problems and situations, because every email client interprets the standard of email slightly differently. And then being able to parse their bodies and of their messages, it led to a lot of technical annoyances that I wasn't enjoying having fun. It's like I solved the basic problem of like, and I have the basic problem of like, how do I get data from this raw text? Mm-hmm. Like, and I felt like, yeah, I rock. Yay. I solved a hard problem. And then that feeling alone doesn't earn money. You have to actually finish and get the thing into people's hands who are hiring it to do a job.
Yeah.
And that was like a very long path I saw ahead, because of I had my list of bugs. I had my list of features that I'm like, well, this will likely, based on my feedback so far. And it was an okay process. I didn't, I feel like I've become better at that whole app testing and finding viability and desirability and all that feasibility. But it was big enough that I thought, I'm just one person. I don't know what to do with this right now. And so I tabled it.
So, yeah, it a little bit overwhelmed.
Yeah, I mean, safe to say, sure. Let's see. Not overwhelmed in the, I don't know what's hitting me, please stop.
Right. Not in the
It's in the
sense.
whole like, oh, I know what's going to be hitting me, and I don't want to go in that room. I just don't want to go there, right? Because 9 years, et cetera, doing interesting systems, financial industry, then whatever, right? So it's like, well, this didn't turn out to be that sweet spot of like, oh, I'm loving doing this, and also it's going to be able to be a paying project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I still might come back to it. Who knows? Um,
But okay, well that's an interesting little data point to grab. The feeling that you
hmm.
had at that moment. But then you started a comic.
Yeah, 2008, I started Art Geek Zoo, and that was a big thing. So it was February of 2008 where um, I knew I needed to get that creative connection going again with, like, instead of, coming from games, I still wanted to take a break from making video games. And in a way, it was because, I mean, the comic came from, I don't want to be stuck, paralyzed, knowing what I could do better. And I had some habits that were very perfectionist focused. And for the one of the reasons the game kept taking a long time to come out is because, well, a new technology would come out, and somehow me and my collaborator would decide that it was a good idea to not finish it in its current form, and somehow just ride this treadmill of bringing it to the latest technology,
Mm.
and other problems too, all more or less perfectionist based, where like you can always think of like this could be better, right?
Mm.
And so then I was experiencing a lot of joy and inspiration, and I follow that a lot. Like that's how I picked up guitar. That's how I started making video games. That's how I started. I mean, at juggling. Pick anything I care about doing, and it comes from just that moment of like, wow, I feel awesome. This looks really exciting. I want to try. And so, yeah, webcomics. Also related, the Project Jinhanu was, the user interface was based on the visual language of comics. So I'd already dived pretty deep into the world, I think, as far as from an academic level, and thinking about, well, how could I communicate in this medium? It's just that I kept always twisting it with, and make it interactive, and make it interactive. And so I'm like, what if I just stop that and put out a comic and embrace it and help practice, put myself in the commitment of like, oh, I'm going to put out an episode every so often, every week, and and at one point 3 times a week.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, and so that project started there, and that was a huge experience practice for me.
So my 2008, I skipped over something, and I got to round back on it because 2008 is where something, uh, my hubris about my capacity came back to get me. So in 2006, when I finished the front, I was approached by a comic book writer to collaborate on a 3-issue miniseries that a publisher was interested in. And as a matter of fact, actually, we put together a pitch first, and he shopped it around. He did all the legwork and like finding a publisher and drafting up the pitch and everything. All I had to do was just do the sample pages. We got a gig, got a publisher that was interested. At the time, the graphic novel market hadn't really kicked into high gear yet. The manga boom was going on in 2006, but we didn't have what we have now in terms of graphic novel market. So the only buyers were independent comic book publishers who do monthly books carried in diamond previews, right? And the model at that time that was pretty prevalent was you get paid on the back end, right? You do all the work up front on spec, and then if the sales are good, then you get a cut. Now, I had finished a miniseries years before for another publisher, and I saw what that amount comes out to if the book doesn't catch on or if you don't properly promote it, and it was very disheartening. But I was feeling pretty good after finishing the front, so I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I did the pitch thinking like, the likelihood of this getting picked up isn't totally awesome. The market's super competitive and it's very small. I don't have that great of a chance, but it got picked up, and so suddenly I'm committed to doing this thing. So during 2007, while I'm doing sugary cereals, while I'm doing all this other stuff, I'm also working on the art for this miniseries. In 2008, I found that I had less and less motivation to do it. And in retro, I've got a lot of like retrospect that I could do on it. Like looking back, I think I know what was happening in my head. But I started shipping slower and slower to the point where the deadline had to get moved, then had to get moved again, and then finally the publisher said, like, to my face, they were like, "Please don't screw this up," and I was like, "Oh, I won't," but I did. And so,
Hmm.
like 2008, between 2008 and 2009, was when I basically let the project fizzle out, and I let a lot of people down. I still consider that to be my greatest disappointment in myself professionally. Um, and it had a direct effect on what happened in 2009. But
Hmm.
I want to collect a few other thoughts on 2008 real quick. Continued sugary cereals throughout the whole year, despite this letdown. Uh, Continued the Art and Story podcast. That was 2009 was when it, or 2008 and 2009 was like where it started to really feel like it was building up steam and people were interacting with this thing that Mark and I were making. We started the live show, Art and Story Alive. It was like a Monday call-in show. And then the work I did with Art Serve Michigan put me on the radar of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. And in 2008, I went and led a 2-day comics workshop there, which was pretty cool. And then I st- I can't believe I fit this all in 1 year. I started planning the Kids Read Comics Festival with Dan Michigan, Edith Donnell, and Dan and Katie Merritt, and my wife Ann. So on top of it, towards the end of the year, I'm like, oh, and we're going to be putting together what became A2CAF. So
Hmm. Yeah, that is a big year, and we didn't. Yeah, that's. I know you mentioned coming back to your 2008, but we started on mine, so like we just switched, we swapped orders. So yeah, that's
well,
awesome. That it sounds like a big year, but it also sounds like there's a like a I'm hearing a progression of what you thought was big. A lot of capacity is growing because you continue exercising to gain more capacity.
sure, but I also lost sight of some motivations. I gained
Mm.
new motivations, and I lost sight of others.
Mm.
That's something that happened in 2008, 2009, 2010. You begin to see the pattern emerging. So I'll take 2009 next. So 2009 wrapped up the first year of sugary cereals, and like the front, it was something where I was like, we're gonna do it again. But once I finished it, I was like, whew, I don't know when we're gonna do it again because that was intense. That was a lot of work. So then I started thinking about maybe it's time to focus more on my own work again rather than facilitate. Because now I'm teaching, now I'm doing an anthology, I'm facilitating a lot of other people's work, but I'm not focusing on my own as much as I used to. And now it's been a couple years since I finished my graphic novel. People were asking, when are you going to do that again? So I started doing, tentative steps. I didn't know. I didn't know. Oh, also, after failing on that deadline, I hit kind of a mental gridlock where it's like I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And for the next year, I didn't draw that many comics at all. I
Mm.
really wound up doing a lot more stuff on like freelance illustrations, storyboards, teaching, and planning KRC. I did 2 mini comics that year. And that was it. And they were neat mini comics, and I'm proud of them. But comparatively speaking to my other years of production, it suddenly felt like I was at a standstill. And it was a period of a lot of self doubt, um, a lot of wondering who the heck I was as a cartoonist anymore. Um, but on the other side, it's like now this is the year that Kevin Cross got involved with the Art and Story podcast, and we started producing more stuff. We started doing Art and Story Extreme, which was like a daily journal show. Started playing upon the success of Kids Read Comics in 2009. Like, let's do it again, but let's do it like a convention for professionals called the Up Fair, which we'll have in Lexington, Kentucky. So we started planning that. So despite like all of this sadness that was going on, all this self doubt and sort of concern, there's also a lot of exuberance in a completely different area of my life. So there was 2009.
Interesting. I guess I've edited out the self doubt that in my story. But it was it had been ever present, honestly, and that's something that um I don't know how many people who choose to make things, share them with their direct audience, um, and whether you're starting a business selling custom soap that's decorative, or if you're making comics, or if you're making music, or if you're doing a portion of the creative pipeline for someone else, where you're like, oh yeah, I edit music and that's it, or I don't know, like who gets the pass from the doubt.
Oh no, and
Yeah,
I
and
want to
not to
emphasize.
say. we all, I don't know, shoot, I don't want that to sound like, and your doubt isn't important alone, like on
Oh,
its, has its own merits, but
of course.
I think it's a
And I
common
just
thing.
I want to say that that doubt was like there's always a consistent level of doubt in any endeavor that you take on, especially if you're doing something interesting. But I highlight this as like this is a period where a low had a direct and profound effect on what happened next, and
Mm.
I saw it happening, right? And so I know I always think of 2009 as that year where I didn't get much done, quote unquote. Like I don't have like books to show for that time,
Hmm.
and that shift in focus made me question because I was still operating under a lot of assumptions that we grew up with that if you're a bolt turner, you turn bolts, and if you screw a screw, you're no longer a bolt turner. Um,
Mm.
and so I was kind of suffering from that. I was like, well, am I a teacher now? Am I a facilitator now? Am I no longer a cartoonist? That kind of thing was kind of eating at me, and it was something I needed to get over in the next coming years. Um, I was not at the level yet where I was like, well, we're kind of everything. I intuited that and I sort of puppeted that, but I didn't believe it yet.
Mm.
Um, what about your 2009?
All right. Well, let's see. My 2009, I actually I continued a contract that was kind of a big one. It was like 18 months or so. That was I was doing user experience consulting at in a variety of capacities for a crop insurance organization. And I mentioned that because like there are there's something that I've had a puzzle with my own, like how do I convey this even though I believe it but I haven't really put it into words very well, is that whether you're making comics for kids or for adults or making video games or whatever, or making a page on an intranet to help remind people of a certain process or whatever, or making an app or something that adjusters use in the field when they're evaluating weather damage on crops or whatever. I think there's a creative process that is universal, and the human connections are universal, and how people understand things is universal. Like they're like we are overall adaptive learning machines. We have emotions. We have our rational brain, and this all stuff it intermixes on every darn project, no matter how you label it as like that's a serious project or that's a fun project. It's all dealing with the human experience, every darn bit of it. And I don't know if I'm quite still able to describe that well, but I'm working at it because it's because it was always funny to me the kinds of things that I would use to be a viable candidate for a job. And it could be like, but yes, I'm a storyteller. And yes, I'm ready to do user experience research, what have you. And I have these different pieces of evidence of what I've produced. And sometimes it's like an audience that you may think, oh, they're not as they don't relate to this storytelling stuff. They're not into this or fun thing or whatever. No, they're super into video games or super into comics, and it actually is a very valuable thing that's helped me have a viable career doing this. Anyway, so yeah, like I'm here. I am doing a long contract for a crop insurance company, and then let's see, what else did I do during that year? I was branching out from I kept producing comics for Art Geek Zoo. It was probably one of my greatest years producing comics,
Hmm,
as far as frequency and number of pages.
that's funny.
And and yeah, I should look back at my skill at the beginning of 2009 versus at the end, and my process had improved a lot, and practice. I also did my first, so I created some products to help support my comic, and I actually tabled for the first time at Baltimore Comic Con.
That's where you met Tyler James, isn't it?
It is where I met Tyler James. We just because we sat next to each other.
Of the Comics Launch podcast and the Comics Tribe,
Yeah,
COMIX.
and it was just fascinating watching him work and seeing his approach, just in an earlier year. and it
Mm-hmm.
makes a lot of sense where he's at. And yeah, Tyler is a fantastic resource that I highly recommend following, and subscribe to his podcast,
Mm-hmm.
of course. I mean, he's taught workshops at Lean Into Art as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. Then let's see. I started to get into. I think that's the year I started to jump into creative challenges, and that's where because I did 30 characters in 30 days for the first time.
Yeah. Which is like Inktober, but it's like every day you create a new character for 30
Yeah.
days.
Oh yeah, and then there's a. Uh, I was annoyed with WordPress and Comics Press for my comics hosting, so I built my own thing on Google App Engine. It was a fork of a different project. A fork means someone had a project that was like, man, this is a good start. This is a really good foundation. I like this, but it didn't cover a variety of things. So I'm like, I'm going to make it now my own thing, and it was a rudimentary blog engine that worked on Google's App Engine hosting mechanism, and I evolved it where it would generate my thumbnails for me and my navigation and all sorts of. It had a lot of interesting stuff. I don't know if it's out in the world because it used to be hosted at Google Code, right?
Mm.
And that went away because of the success of GitHub.
Mm.
So, or no, or is it? It's frozen. I think it's out there, but it's read only. Anyway, yeah, Comicaster, which I later made Comicaster JS, but they're two very different pieces of technology. Anyway,
Okay. So now plowing through my 2010.
I also became a dad.
Oh, that's right. That's a big change. um, so 2010, I want to underline something really quick. I fell into teaching by accident. I fell into teaching because, as I pointed out in 2006, I was trying to put together my freelance career, trying to put it back together, and somebody passed me a want ad for somebody who could teach how to make comics in Detroit. And I just showed up for an interview, and I got the gig. And then,
No, that's awesome.
and then after landing in a classroom, finding out that like my approach to thinking about comics was very, very useful to 10-year-olds. And my way of interacting with kids was, you know, it was raw, but it was useful to their, purposes, and I wound up getting a lot of training there. So that's to say that, and as I was talking about in 2009, I went through this whole crisis of like, am I a cartoonist or am I a teacher? What the heck am I now? Here I am finding myself helping organize the Up Fair in 2010 in Lexington, Kentucky, and Kids Read Comics 2010 in Dearborn, Michigan. Now, both events were exceedingly difficult to do for a variety of reasons, which I don't think we have time to go into here, and I don't even really feel like going into because I mean it's all endeavors where you work with other people are fraught with other people, other venues, other organizations are fraught with friction points, right? It's going to happen. And because I'd only done one event before in my past, I was still really green and I had no idea what I was up against, in terms of how do we make this thing even happen, right? Um, so at the time, I remember Kids Read Comics 2010 felt like a very, very difficult show. I felt like it was very hard to get through it, and like it was a pleasure to do. It was great connecting with all these different cartoonists, and I think everybody had an okay time. But putting the show on was way harder that year than anything I'd ever done before in my life. And so there was this kind of nagging question of like, are we already done? Is this the last one already? Just 2 years in, But as I collected this information, I was like, wait a second, the Up Fair was super important because that's where I really got to work with Rob for the first time, right? Because you did a workshop there. And I remember, I can't remember if I reached out to you or if you reached out to me, but somehow we wound up starting to talk on Skype about the workshop you wanted to do, right? I think.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really where like Lean Into Art kind of started, like right there at the Up Fair. And then at Kids Read Comics 2010, as difficult as that show was, that's where I connected with Ryan Estrada. That's where I've really got to hang out with him for the first time. Dave Roman, Brandon Dayton, people who became like really, really important in my life later on. I met at this, tricky little thing that like felt like it was almost imploding. That same year, Art and Story Supreme launched, which was like sort of like the final act in the life cycle of Art and Story, the podcast, where we launched a subscription service. This is before Patreon. where it was this cobbled together thing where we were doing like extra content behind a paywall, and we were doing like even like consulting, where people could like at like a certain tier, we would like meet with you on Skype to talk about your projects. That's how I got to meet and talk with Casey Van Heist, as a matter of fact. My friendship with her began there.
Well,
Um, that's where Thunder Punch Daily began, and as like a minor note, Boulder and Fleet happened that year. So it was just like an experiment that I did one week where I was like, can I come up with a comic from concept to completion on top of all my other obligations within a week? And it was a desperate Hail Mary play to still make comics despite all this other stuff that was filling up my life.
mm.
So there's 2010. What about your 2010? This is where our lives intersect.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. I was let's see. So I continued in a consulting capacity, serving different organizations. I started the Polytechnic Cast, and I have then self-published Art Geek Zoo as a collected volume of the first 4 chapters, which is a complete story arc, and I called it Hidden Talent. Published that via Kablam. Then of course, I tabled at Upfair, and I started taught a workshop at Upfair. Yeah,
I remember.
it was fun, and actually, I mean, yeah, that's obviously met a lot of great people at Upfair. And let's see, including the second time I met Krishna Sadasavam in person, but actually then talked with him.
That's right. Christian was there. Lee Sharolis
Yeah.
was there. Barry Gregory was there.
Oh yeah, and let's see. Oh yeah, 2010. Well, that is the year I published. I initially published Guitar Fretter.
Mm.
Yeah, that was pretty big. It was like, yep, I'm going to keep making games, and that's one I worked on, solo. I had people experiment and test, and we've told that story a variety of times. But that was a big one. So Guitar Fretter is the video game I made that helps you. Imagine it's kind of like a pattern matching mixed with Space Invaders, but the whole point is to help you memorize the note positions on a guitar fretboard. And I was collaborating with Kate on a comic project called Babies Love Comics, and we made Zoe Zeus. I did 30 characters in 30 days again. I did my first 24-hour comic day.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
This is a big year for you.
And then, I continued Comic Caster.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
What was the general character of that year then, like emotional wise?
Let's see. Emotionally, let's see. I felt more focused, and I felt productive. I felt good. 2010 was an awesome year.
2010 was another high and low for me. I mean, because it was like 2 very stressful but very meaningful projects that I didn't know whether or not they were going to amount to anything. And then at the end of 2010, I knew that Art and Story was coming to an end. And so that was when I started the Comics Are Great podcast in order to like sort of keep the momentum of what we had going, but like obviously on my own with my own thing. And Mark and
Yeah.
Kevin were off to do their own thing. So it was a mixed bag year.
Mm-hmm.
So 2011 was the year where I started to see some of the repercussions of all the teaching and advocacy work I was doing. Because while I knew I was facilitating meaningful events for people, it was really kind of, I hope this doesn't sound like it's aggrieved, because it wasn't. It was very meaningful work, but it made me no money. And as a matter of fact, it cost me money. For the 2010 Kids Read Comics, I remember Mark and Kevin and I used the money we made off of Art and Story Supreme to pay for lunch for all the artists who came. You
Oh,
know, um,
wow.
I mean, it wasn't. I mean, we put up there was like a banner that said like "Thanks to Art and Story" for lunch and everything. So I mean, I don't think it wasn't the secret thing where we were suffering alone, but it was like doing these events costs money, and like we didn't have like a lot of institutional support yet. So a lot of these costs were coming out of our pockets from like the KRC organizers. Um,
Mm.
but 2011 rolls around, and suddenly I get approached by the Chelsea Public Library in Chelsea, Michigan, to be the next artist in their artist in residence program, where they were going to pay me to do a series of workshops for the city of Chelsea, not just for the library. Like I did all sorts of little different events throughout the year. And they even gave me a budget to hire other artists, to bring in other Michigan artists to come in and teach workshops. So I got to hire Ruth McNally Barshaw of the Ellie McDoodle series, Matt Fizel of the Cynical Man series to lead different events. They did like this TV interview with me, and then it wound up leading to me doing an art exhibition. I curated an art exhibition at the River Gallery there. I think, yeah, you attended that, right, Rob? Yeah,
Yeah, yep.
that was a good show.
It was a good show.
And then the Captain Seriously project happened because of that. I got on the radar of Seriously Chelsea because of my role as artist in residence uh, in Chelsea. Um, this the KRC that happened in Chelsea that year was um, it was still small, but it was growing. Like, so you were there. I mean, it was an ambitious project because we like spread it through the town. We had like a scavenger hunt. We had all these different art stations set up all over the downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And while everybody who interacted with it had a really, really wonderful time, the general feeling was super positive, but it wasn't very big yet. It wasn't 7,000 people. It wasn't, it was like, I don't remember what the numbers were at the time, but it didn't feel like it was exploding yet. But the model was proven by the third year. And that's when the Ann Arbor District Library said, like, hey, we'd love to be your host one year.
Mm.
So that relationship began in 2011, and then that's when the Comics Are Great podcast went to the Ann Arbor District Library. So I approached them and said, like, hey, what do you think about a partnership where you provide me with recording studio and editing, and I provide you with content? Um, so a lot of really neat stuff started happening that year. Um, and I'd say that's the year where I started to see um, reputation and acknowledgement of capacity happening,
Mm.
right? But it took, 3 years of me not knowing what I was doing and just really trying to help to get to that point, you know? So
Yeah. 2011, right?
2011. Oh, and
Mm-hmm.
for more on the Captain Seriously project, I'm going to mention it a couple more times, but we actually talked with Jesse Kaufman, who is the director, or
Mm-hmm.
he's kind of my boss on this Captain Seriously comics project. In episode 163, we talked with him. We talked all about the project. So I don't, if you're curious, go check that out. It's like 2 hours on it.
Yeah,
Um,
the theme of that was rapid iterative collaboration
right.
because it's the mission of that project is fascinating, and then how you guys work together is
Yeah.
is pretty great.
He's an awesome partner. So, and that's been a very, very important and meaningful part of my life for the past, 5 years. And again, it came out of me just like punching in the dark at all these different advocacy projects, all the while questioning, am I even a cartoonist anymore? Only to land this gig that scratches all of those itches, right? Captain Seriously is special because it's like I get to do advocacy, I get to help children, and I get to make really cool comics that I love to make to help those kids. So it's like it's a total dream job, right? But I sure didn't see that coming in 2010. Anyway, so you're 2011.
So many awesome themes that I can't wait to explore. The whole I didn't see it coming, the building up of the experiences, and what sort of feedback are we getting from them? Where's the signal of like what helps us proceed, and how much of it is purely internally motivated, and what are we seeing from our audiences and whatnot? That's going to be
Mm-hmm.
good to dig into. Um, let's see. So my 2011, it was this the year that we really collaborating together on Lean Into Art, which we've told the story before. In a nutshell, it started out as more or less I was consulting for the project, and I mean it was partway into the year where it I think you were like, hey, do you just want to partner on this? And that was super exciting, and I, it was and is an honor, and I'm really glad that happened. Continued to Babies Love Comics, collaborating with Kate. Made a series of comics called The Cuteness. We launched the Lean Into Art podcast. We launched this event called 30 Classes in 30 Days, which was part of the whole spreading the word about and the mission of Lean Into Art. I participated in something that came out of the like one of the events near the end of Art and Story called Mini Comics Dump Truck, and that was a good catalyst to finish 4 comics for me. Um, which I did two that were Art Geek Zoo related, that were just sort of side stories. One is Pick Wingvey, Born Guitarist. The other one is Max Ruckus Effects, Heavyweight Lifting of the Heart. And then Zoe Zeus and Zoe's Big Feelings. So it was fun. Like, pretty different, style comics, but
Yeah.
a lot of fun. Kids Read Comics, I did 2 workshops that year. Storytelling to make your comics UI awesome, which was like a new version of that. That's one that I've updated a few different times for different events. And then Jokes to Comics, Laughing Yeti, Monkey Spaghetti.
I remember that one. I remember that was like in the main lab, or not the main multi-purpose room of the library there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there were a lot of kids in that room.
Yeah, it was fun. It definitely was a great trial run of I have done a lot of teaching at different points in my career to spread the word and help people dig into tools that I had built or been part of a team building, right? And that's that. So I had done that for adults and people like into their adult careers and stuff. But this was the first time really digging into the really wider kid audience,
Mm.
and it was.
Wow.
I mean, I felt ready enough, but it was a lot of fun. That you just don't know, like some of these things you commit to, and it could have gone different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but like another thing that I want to like dog ear for discussion in the second part of the show is that you did try to prepare for success. Like you reached out to me and you were trying to get a sense of what to expect in terms of audience, expect in terms of what are my expectations as a convention organizer and the programming coordinator of the thing. You know, making sure that you're designing this thing to meet whatever needs you can possibly anticipate, right? Um, you didn't just show up as like, hey, I got a workshop, let's go. You know?
That's yeah. Well, that's the whole systemic designer in me
Yeah.
that I look for the people affected by the thing that I'm working on, and why are they affected by it, and how can I adjust what I'm making to meet the widest group's needs based on who's there paying for it or not, or who's there, um, who's kind of like the sponsor audience, and then also like why am I there, and
Mhm.
can we meet those goals?
Also, yeah, I want to underline the 30 classes in 30 days thing because that's an interesting part of the lead into art life cycle. Is part of that design, at least what I was bringing to the design of that project, was observing what I saw were the shortcomings of art and story. Not that there was any shortcoming in terms of what the hosts were providing or what the content was, but more of in terms of the format and the technology of the time. I said, doing essays, having discussions is all very interesting, but having done teaching and having interacted in live classrooms, that is a much richer experience. And I would love to try to do something that takes that rich experience to a broader audience on the internet. And that was really the original goal. Was it was going to be a series of interactive classes like lynda.com kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Two guys trying to sort that all out for themselves. It wound up being a very big job, and
That was a big job.
it was a very big job.
It was fun. I mean, there was no Patreon, there was no Kickstarter. It was we ran our own campaign
Yeah,
and got signups, and it was I would say well attended,
it was.
and that was a lot of content. I mean, yeah, because I had essentially had workshops in my repertoire, but then I was adding more to be one of the providers of workshops. I mean, Jersey has, you had a pretty big repertoire already, but I still think you did new stuff for that
I
event.
did do new stuff
Yeah.
for that one. Yeah,
And I'm pretty sure you did like 10 classes or something insane. And I
an
did
intense
6,
month.
and Krishna did like 4 or 5 or something like that. And
That's
and it
right.
just,
And Kim
yeah,
Holm did some, and
Kim,
yeah,
yeah.
that was an intense
Um,
month.
yep, Kevin Cross.
Yeah.
He did a class, and like it's funny, like then some of them too, like the kind of popularity we had them available as downloads after, and for pay, and like the that Brandon Dayton one, just
Dynamic line work. Yeah.
dynamic line work. People want it so
Yeah.
much, which
Well,
is
when you look at
awesome.
Brandon's artwork, you know why. I mean, he's incredible.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so then again, we've got like lot of ramping up capacity, right? A lot of
Hmm.
adding on, a lot of iterating on. Well, I've done this so far. What happens if I take what I learned from this and apply it to that? I think that's another part of the narrative that I'm hearing here. Want to make sure we got time for everything because we still got 5 years to go.
I exactly, and we knew we would. Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is kind of our experiment. So we have a reality check of
Mm.
how do we want to tackle these next 5 years.
Yeah, I'm just
This
gonna only
is
hit like a few points in the next ones because now, like at least for me, I start hitting into maintaining things. Like
hmm,
I'm still adding on and growing, but like there's a lot of things that are like now they're in motion. Like so, like for instance, 2012, Captain Seriously, I did it again. You know, a third grade book.
hmm,
First one we did for second graders was a coloring book comic. The next year, it's like now let's do a full color book. So let's see how we can fit that in, and that's when I really began working with Jesse.
hmm,
Um, Kids Read Comics, its first year happened at the Ann Arbor District Library, which was a whole new set of challenges. I'm working with a new partner, different kinds of institutional support, um, and all my advocacy work that I had been doing. I was in the last 2 years at this time. I think it was like 2011. I started working for no, it's 2010. I started working for the Ann Arbor Arts Center as a teacher, doing classes here and there. And that got me on the radar of the University of Michigan, strangely enough. And I wound up doing a year-long artist in residency for the Lloyd Hall Scholarship Program or Scholars Program, where I was like in a residence hall in an office, just paid to be there to draw comics and let kids have access to me. And that was a really fun year. Um, and then, I got invited to host the Ignatz Awards at the Small Press Expo, a really, really awesome comic show that I have bags of respect for, and wanted to be more of use to that tribe. And because of the work I was doing with Kids Read Comics, and because of the other advocacy work that I've been doing over the years, they came to me and said, like, "How would you like to host our award show this year?" And that was a huge honor and a lot of fun. And then like yeah, like ongoing things at this point. Teaching classes, comics are great. Leading to art is underway. Kids Comics Revolution podcast begins with Dave Roman, and then continuing on with my freelance illustration. A lot of stuff happening, right? But you're
hmm.
2012.
Well, let's see. So my 2012, let's see. I shifted gears from being fully independent consulting to then getting my first full time job in like roughly 6 years. That was a big thing,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I was working at a creative interactive agency and being sort of a lead user experience resource. You know, led a lot of projects, did some mentoring, and it was fun. Um, that yeah, some really cool experiences, cool clients, and practice. Which is when I referred to that time a lot as my breaking boards practice, where it's like, okay, do I really have this this metaphorical capacity, creative belt, whatever? And yeah, definitely did. So that was fun, but it was also like a kind of intense fun and amazing environment too. Like wild to be around a bunch of people creative in a very passionate way of their various disciplines, and then be, teaming together in different ways and different projects. It was what I was hoping to experience, where I was like, okay, if I'm going to go from independent, get into this world of full time gig again, I really want it to be nourishing me and whatnot. So it was a good learning experience, and I'm glad for that. Um, let's see. Oh yeah, I taught a web design class for 12 weeks for high school students who were studying at MCAD, which was fun.
Remember
Minneapolis
that?
College of Art
Yeah.
and Design. Yeah, yeah, super fun and wild to not just have a workshop where, yes, for 20 minutes to 2 hours, we're going to cover a topic. It was
Yeah.
no. This is 12 weeks,
Yeah.
different thing,
A
and
lot of time to spend with those kids.
yes, it was cool and a awesome learning experience, and honestly would do it again. So let's see. We started the Extra Lean podcast in 2012, and then I did a new workshop called Making 8 Games with HTML5 and JavaScript, Underwater Tomato Ninja.
CreativeCodeKit.com.
And it grew into that. So that started as as sort of some code and a brief experience where it's like, well, how could people get choose your own adventure exposure to different parts of making a video game? Because who knows, given the people in this room at this time, what would be the most exciting thing? So instead of saying like, well, I've got the podium, it's this, and let's do this. It was a choose your own adventure experiment that I enjoyed. So we literally would hit slides, and they would people would vote on like which direction we went into the topic, as far as like, are we going to look at the making sound effects? Are we going to look at animation? And it was a lot of fun. And great material that I built off of later on. Great experience and material, whatever. I don't know. I'm not giving myself an A+ on it, but it was good to have built it. Let's see. Other things to do. Oh, yeah. So the prior year, I did a 24-hour comic day and failed because I was like, oh, I'm going to just go ahead and start teaching myself Manga Studio and make it 24 hours. And that I only got 12 pages in. But then this time I succeeded, and I made a comic that I ended up revising this year. But at the time it was called No Remorse, River Horse.
River Horse, that's right. And now it's Toughest Hippo. What's the full title?
Goes to Bunnytown.
Goes to Bunnytown. Told entirely in verse. It's an adorable comic.
Thanks. Then the design of This Panda Needs You, updated guitar fretter, stuff like that. So it's a building year, and also like kind of a shifting of contexts of like, well, how do I work on these different creative commitments now that I'm back in the full-time world?
Yeah. So okay, I'm gonna suggest that we like do the last 1, 2, 3, 4 years, just like in a row, really quickly, and just
bust
touch
it
on.
out quick. I agree, because
I want to get to 10,000 feet up. I know you
yes.
do too. So and again, so 2013, more of maintaining things that now have momentum behind them. I teaching at the Art Center. Comics are great. Lean into art. The Kids Comics Revolution work that I'm doing with Dave Roman and freelance illustration still going on. But the additions to that year were that was the year we did the Kids Comics Revolution award ceremony for the first time. Ran that award show. And I started working on RoboForce, comic for John Kent for the new toy line over at toyfinity.com. 2014, the big change was, again, we're continuing on with the same things, teaching at the Art Center, lean into art, Kids Comics Revolution, freelance illustration. Comics Are Great came to an end around this time. Went on hiatus. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with it. There's always doubt. There's always like questions about what the things are, what the life cycle is of the thing that you're interacting with. But this year, the big changes were I started working on the Warren Commission report with Dan Mishkin and Ernie Colon, which was a big event in my life. We've talked about it a lot in the show. And Captain Seriously that year, Jesse, I know you're watching in the chat. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is the year where I did the 5th, 6th, and 7th grade books all at the same time. And I had to take on an assistant. I had to hire Rachel Polk to color the books because I just didn't have. It was more than I could take on. I was already at capacity. And towards the end of that year, I started the Boulder and Fleet webcomic. That was when I finally said, like, the heck with it. I don't have my own personal project. I need to have a personal project in my life. I'm going to start checking in once a week with that. 2015, Boulder and Fleet continues. Let's see. This is when I went to Salt Lake City with Brandon Dayton for an educator day, doing some teaching out there. The Ann Arbor Art Center launched their computer labs. I started teaching Manga Studio classes there. Began teaching for the Captain Seriously project, a component of it, teaching kids how to make comics so that they can make their own comics anthologies based on the characters they've been interacting with in the comic series. And I started thinking about self-care. I started actually jogging or running or whatever you want to call it in order to like start treating my body better. 2016, Boulder and Fleet continues. Big story wraps up and start a new story. Kids Read Comics changes to the Ann Arbor Comics Art Festival, biggest show yet. This is the year where like attendance almost doubled. Um, did the Captain Seriously eighth grade book, which was a huge shifting in tone and approach and style, and it was immensely challenging, but also immensely rewarding. It took me way outside my comfort zone, and I'm really glad that I got to have that experience. And hearing the kids interact with it was super rewarding. Um,
Which we covered. I think that
yeah,
was on the podcast
with Jesse,
with Jesse. That is a
163.
fantastic story. The
Yeah,
whole setup.
yeah,
It's that's speaking of a behind the music. That's really worth listening to.
and it's one of those things which maybe we'll talk more about in 10,000 Feet Up, where if you were to ask me in 2011 or 2010, could you do it? I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so. So it was like it was a huge growing year, and probably the most valuable thing to me as a cartoonist was it took until then. 2016 was the first year where I didn't have to do any freelance illustration, storyboard, product design, character design. Uh, 100% of my work came through teaching and comics alone. I didn't
Hmm.
have to do any more subsidizing, right? Um, so yeah. So let's bring you 2013, 14, 15, and 16 for you, Rob.
Okay, let me bust it out. Okay, so 2013, there was a really wild, different professional thing that popped up for me that I didn't really plan on my interactive agency thing because it was such a powerful learning mechanism for me. I wasn't anticipating that wrapping up so soon, but a new mission popped up, and it was like, well, could you? Let's see. That's a let's see. I've done talks about this publicly, and it's an interesting thing. But big company in Minneapolis, Target, was starting a team. They called it the Rad Team. How could we, make things um, in a rapidly collaborative way that was evidence based? Mixing in a variety of disciplines, flat hierarchy, all this kind of stuff, and it was a fun experiment and life changing, pretty awesome. And I learned a ton. I've yeah, I don't know what to say as far as the. It was an amazing experience that continued 2013 through 2015, and then that I did return to working on. So This Panda Needs You was designed earlier, but then I really started working on it, and kept updating other things. So 2013 was kind of like a big let's see what happens now. Almost like I had these buckets of like, well, I've got my my portfolio of professional commitments is what I've ended up calling it, right? And I've got a primary one and I've got secondary ones, right? Okay. And so I was like, well, I'm switching up my primary one, but I don't have to switch up my secondary one. So this is a good practice thing. 2014, I published an ebook based on the work on Underwater Tomato Ninja, and that's at let's see, creativecodekit.com. And there's an open source project where you can essentially dig through a bunch of free assets for uh, some art and sound and game code and whatnot, and learn how to program a game by playing around with and go ahead and break a game that exists already. That's the idea behind it. And there's a book as well. So yeah, I made Comicaster JS, which is a sort of an app like experience, but you can view it on the web for exploring webcomics. And I migrated all my stuff at artgeekzoo.com into it. And then I'd actually taught a workshop about it at Kids Read Comics. I did some sort of roadshow stuff for my primary professional gig, where gave a talk at, I did some co-presenting of talks with this band of folks that had all formed this team together. And then let's see, we did Art Sound Off 2014.
Yeah, I skipped over
Started
those.
that, and let's see. Gosh, I'm going too slow. So 2015, I was just puzzling about like, well, I want to do more visual art. I think it's like, I know I can make something for 30 days in a row. I'm not really worried about that. What if I did something every day for a year? And so I did the unblocking project, and then continued with expanding my workshop repertoire that year as well. I did Sketching the Happiest Kitty in the Universe and paper prototyping power up for game design, and both at Kids Read Comics. I did I did a talk co-presented at another thing with the museum computing conference, which was Experience, Traverse, Inhabit, Bring a Sense of Place to Digital Navigation. Fun thing that just came up based on someone reaching out to me on Twitter, and I think we chatted about that on Extra Lean at some point. Let's see. So the big thing, I actually finished another video game. I got This Pen to Need You out into the world. That represents a ton of lessons in and of itself, where other than like the core concept, I wore every hat. And I pushed to learn sprite animation, doing it, pushing it further. Like with Guitar Fretter, I took some shortcuts and whatnot. I wanted to push further with this, and it represents a bunch of things. 2016, I did the new version of No Remorse River Horse, and now as we said, it became Toughest Hippo Goes to Bunnytown. I did a lightning talk. And so I did more talks and stuff. I mean, this is a year where people will have reached out to me, and I will happily advocate for storytelling, game design, UX, and mashing them up, flat collaboration, all sorts of things that, and also being very self-determined when it comes to what do you do next, and how do you explain what you do to what you want to get paid to do next. That kind of thing. So yeah, here we are at the end of 2016. I did another really fun workshop that was I'm grateful for the opportunity to. So at A2CAF, I did a workshop combining Raspberry Pis plus game design, and music and art, and it was called Raspberry Pi Game Gumption. So a lot of fun. Anyway,
That was cool. I only got to see a few minutes of it, but I mean, it looked like a really engaged group of kids. And that was in the new Ann Arbor District Library Secret Lab, where you
Secret
were.
Lab, super cool facility.
Yeah.
And it definitely appealed to a wider audience than I was expecting, and it was a lot of fun. Where parents, when there was a lull in the action, a lull in the questions, all of a sudden parents were talking about like, hey, have you tried using Raspberry Pi to do this or that, and just people excited and engaging on a variety of ways and different angles that you have a chance to be there, and even if you don't know the answer, you can explore it with them right there. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, you get really good audiences at A2CAF events. Ever since it came to Ann Arbor, that was the thing that we noticed. Now, there's one thing that we didn't mention, that for the past year or so, you and I have also been working on an ebook/audiobook project, which
Yep.
we have a lot of work put into, but there's a big chunk of work that still needs to happen in order to ship it. And I'm wondering if we can save that for some of the reflections as well, because
Yes.
a thing that I've been learning is we keep talking about all this growth and capacity. We're hitting some ceilings in recent years, right? There's only so much you can fit in. And I feel like the ebook is something that has suffered as a result of that diminished capacity, right? Or rather that threshold of capacity.
Yeah, let's explore like the intersections of like, where does that project sit, and why does the capacity not get channeled to it?
Right. So, okay. So you feel like we're ready to go 10,000
Oh
feet
my
up?
gosh, yes.
Okay.
And I am near infinitely grateful if people have found that exploration of 10 years a worthwhile thing. This is an experiment, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to, I mean, so as we listed this, this would have been good to say up front, but I would imagine that it has to have caused reactions of like, well, where were you during those years, and what kind of experiences have you been building?
Yeah.
And then as we head into the sort of 10,000 feet up and making more meaning of it, and how we explore that narrative, it'd be interesting if how are the listeners exploring this for their own past 10 years?
Yep. For sure. Well, as a matter of fact, you're leading me into talking about where they can share those thoughts with us. So in 1 minute, or about a minute and 30 seconds, we're actually going to explore, like, what do we do with all this information? We combed all this information, we put it together. Now, what do we do with it, and how do we think about it, and how do we process it? But before we do that, we have some other sponsors to thank, because we do this thing. We participate in this service called Patreon. Patreon.com/lean into art, where if you can pledge a monthly donation to the show. It can be like $1 a month, it could be $10 a month, whatever you feel it's worth and what you can afford. And we want to thank some of the 5 of our Patreon supporters who make this show possible and make it sustainable. Becca Hilburn. You can find Becca's stuff on Twitter at Nattosoup, Nattosoup. And then we also need to thank the mysterious K, letter K. We don't know who you are, but we appreciate your support of the show for all these months. Rachel Ross, on Twitter at NYC Terrace, New York City, basically NYC TRIS. Rachel is always a good audience and always fun to interact with online. Jonathan Warrenson, we couldn't find any Twitter or Facebook information for you, but we do appreciate your patronage and your support of the show. And then Mike White. Mike White is on Facebook under FE Follies. So if you go to facebook.com/FE Follies, you can see Mike's work there. Thank you, all you guys, for supporting us, making the show sustainable. And if if you're not a supporter and you want to sign up, you can participate in our open mic post that we do once a month, where you can share your experiences with reflecting on things the way we do, and we will interact with you there at patreon.com/leanintoart. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you very much. And what a
All
great
right.
ad read that you do without any prep. It aligns with the music. It's awesome.
It's called being a professional. All right, so let's hit some happy music. Climb up. Start thinking about the abstract aspects of this time. Whoa, that ended abruptly. Let's think about questions to consider, right? When we're going back through our histories. I wonder if you can lead us through this one, Rob, because
Okay.
I heard a lot of patterns going on, but I'm wondering what you heard.
Well, I'm wondering, in the midst of it, as best as you can, looking back, what was like a narrative that you told yourself that evolved? Like, and to frame that further, like a narrative you tell yourself is like, I'm really catching up this year. I'm really, I'm cashing in this year. I've earned this, or whatever. Or I've got this. I have no idea what I'm doing, and yet maybe I'm engaged on a bunch of things, which kind of would show that maybe you actually do know what you're doing, because people are asking you to serve and whatever. And so yeah, what would be an example of that kind of log line style narrative that evolved?
A big one that evolved was, and I have a suspicion that this is kind of tied to the time period I come out of and my own personal history. So I don't know how necessarily useful this will be for anybody else, but maybe it will. And I was just talking about this with Jesse today, for crying out loud. Jesse, you're getting a lot of mentions on this show. I was talking about how, like, when I turned 40, I went through like this brief period of anger where I was like, when I was 11, I said I'd be best friends with Stan Lee by now, There are narratives you construct when you're young and you're naive and you're inexperienced. And, if you try to measure yourself by those narratives later on, you can find yourself in some trouble. And one of the narratives that I had is a professional cartoonist makes 100% of their living from making comics, and everything else is just material that goes to help promote that career. And I think I was I was sharing is that there were a lot of times where that narrative was being challenged, and I didn't engage with it necessarily healthily. I engaged with that narrative in sort of this struggling, like, well, I'm just doing this to get by. Like the teaching was totally like, I'm going to do this to get by until I can get my comics career going, right? And then I didn't see the immediate connection of the teaching work into my comics work. I didn't see the mutual benefit they could share with one another. Because what I learned, so this is all after the fact. This is by no means pre-planned. This is by no means calculated. This is all found through just doing it. Is that by working with kids, I'm getting to experience their worldview more, which brings me more in touch with where I was when that was their age, which helps make me a better writer of stories for their age. At least I feel like I'm better at it than I was. Like in working on the Captain Seriously project, in engaging with the kids of Chelsea, and learning what they're struggling with, learning what they're experiencing, then having to put myself in that place again in order to construct a story to be of service to them, but is also entertaining to them. I feel like the teaching came back and funneled back into my writing to improve it, right? So the narrative changed from this very, I would say, simplistic point of view of you were just this or you're just that, to understanding that it's much more nuanced, and I think I developed a more holistic sense of um, how careers work. Now, what that means, does that mean that I feel utterly confident and at ease in all the different circles that I inhabit? No. I often, like for instance, this rocket book I'm working on now, I don't know what's going to happen with it. It could be, I mean, I feel very proud of the work and I'm very excited about the work and I'm going to promote the living heck out of it when it comes time. But do I know if it's going to sell? No. Do I know if it's going to lead to more opportunities? No. I have no idea what's going to come out of this thing. But I feel like I'm better at sensing that things that seem like sideline things can go back into feeding into improving its quality or improving its reach and so on. I feel a little bit more of an assuredness, if not outright predestination. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I heard so many interesting themes that echo, um, and I wonder what I wonder is where am I doing that now?
Yeah.
So, am I applying that same kind of selective severity to something going on right now that I'll be more gentle about as I build up experience with it?
Yeah.
And that's something I want to reflect on, because I don't have a quick and easy answer that that wouldn't just be me making something up on the spot. So, but the question, I find that's I am going to use that as I do more reflection and planning for what's
Yeah.
next.
And I mean, just in the few minutes we've been talking, I'm already seeing like three places in my life where, yes, I see myself having like a level of sort of that severe anxiety about it. And while I can logic myself to death on it, saying like, well, you've been through this before, and here's where you see these patterns happening before. It can give me a sense of reassurance, but it doesn't necessarily give me answers on how to navigate it, right?
And that's where I am not a psychologist, right? And I do this for myself,
Right.
and I think these kind of things through. And that's where I am concerned about the narrative. Like, what is the story that what am I telling myself throughout this, through this experience right now? What have I told myself, and how has that changed? Because that's, it's something that could be a little bit beneath the surface, where even if I'm not thinking about it, I may be feeling a lot of anxiety because I am telling myself a story that, well, I read the Penny Arcade Manifesto, so I'm good, right? And now I just really have to make the thing that is perfect for my like, and what I believe in, and somehow it's going to connect and it's going to work. And this is so like maybe I being inspired from a signal and then starting to follow it, but like can I follow it in a different way and be more inquisitive as opposed to like judgmental, and that now wait a minute, maybe I don't know exactly all the places where I might be, where that judgment might be happening, but going through this exercise of saying 10 years of this, that's a lot of me habits that I can pick through, and I can notice like, oh yeah, I'm kind of stickler about that. Is that useful? I don't know. Like, how's that turned out? So overall, and like, it's not going to be perfect and scientific, but yet it will be more, at least revealing, and a handy tool that I can start to apply looking forward and looking back again, where I'm like, well, okay, now that I feel a little less severe about this, what do I think? Um, like, was this project ending? Like, why did that happen? What does it mean?
Hmm.
And what can I learn from it?
Right. Yeah. So I'll save mine for final thought. But yeah, I've already, just in the discussion we've had today, I've had some, when I think about the ebook that we've been working on, why haven't I found the time to funnel into, chipping away at that project? Um, and even beyond evaluating what my motivations for the project are, because I'm committed to it. I like it. I mean, I put in a lot of work into it. Of course, I want to do it. But what habits do I detect in this history that may be something I can point to say, like, perhaps that's the thing that needs tweaking?
Hmm.
Uh, what other ways do we evaluate these? Like, I want to think about like the data points you were exploring when you were doing your big experience inventory. How do you feel about the 10
So,
years?
well, okay. So to ram the point home about narrative, it's about like it's about sitting with it long enough, examining it, and it's hard. Like, how do I feel about examining that much past experience and doing that much reflection? It it's difficult, but yet feels overall worthwhile. And everyone's mileage may vary. Where you can say, oh, whatever, and have your own rationalization for where you don't think it's a great idea. And I think rock on.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
that's totally good. But like, I do it because I like to find my blind spots when I can. And I know I don't always succeed, but like when I sit long enough with a thing, and I may actually hear the story I'm telling myself. And then that helps me reinterpret what I've gathered, and try to question it and say, like, well, is that a useful hypothesis? Is this how does this hold up? How doesn't it hold up? And I can critically examine it. And so it's a bit of a theme of using rational tools and emotional tools, and saying, like, these things coexist in our brains, and I know that, and I want to try to not be blinded by either. So how do I examine? So like, that helps me through the idea that, well, doing that much reflection is difficult, because I saw your reflection, and I was like, I opened the show notes. You prepared the initial draft this time, and I was like, holy crap. he, he went really into this, and now I guess I'm going really into this. Because even if, again, like, if you do like the reflection of, like, well, you look back at a year, you look back at a week, or you look back at 10 years, if you're even at least pulling out bullet points and something, it is better than nothing.
Mm.
But then there's something between that casual approach and like a more determined, digging deeper approach that might be a little more useful quantity of information to poke through. And the promise of that, I mean, that helps me work through it. Of like, hey, this is annoying, I want to go skip rope, or hey, this is, I would rather play a video game, this sucks.
Well, I'll tell you what it did for me is it concretized some things that could easily be read as platitudes, right? So if you think, like, it's always darkest before the dawn, I found spots in my biography where, like, when I look back, I think that was a dark time for me. That was emotionally not a cool place to be. But then at the same time, like, one of my darkest years was the year where I first connected with you, where I first connected with Ryan Estrada, Dave Roman, and so on. And while at the time it didn't, I had no idea what the significance of this meeting was. I met this cool guy named Rob, and he seems really committed. He seems really plugged in and passionate about this idea. Oh, I'd like to hang out with him again. I wonder if I will. Like it's like with that kind of meeting, right? The same thing with Dave Roman, same thing with Ryan Estrada. I was like, wow, these really cool people. I would love to be around more of this all the time. um, Not knowing what kind of profound impact those meetings were going to have in the years to come. Now, I had to show up. I had to keep reaching out and showing up and being in the same place, and sometimes not connecting. Like, oh, we're going to meet at this place and it didn't happen, that kind of thing. Um, so I had to do something to that regard, but it it became evidence that the moment as it felt at that moment isn't the final word on what that moment meant, right?
Oh my gosh, that is a huge insight. I mean, the final arbiter of like what a moment means isn't like I'm super stoked right now or I'm really mad or whatever. It just
Right.
it plays out in a different um it plays out, and we cannot predict,
Right.
honestly, like all the details. It just doesn't work that way.
But at the time, it often feels like this is going to be like this forever. This is the way it is. This is my lot, you
That's
know?
one of the narratives that like keeps showing up,
Yeah.
where I'm like, yeah, this is like, this outcome not going to get there, and oh, it's a mystery, and why is it a mystery, and why
Yeah.
and yet uh you can be building toward it, yet it's like, so you mentioned the showing up to different a tribe, a variety of tribes representing a common purpose or whatever. That is a pretty powerful habit that for me, that over the course of time, it seems like, well, connections end up getting made,
Yeah.
and you end up being able to reach and work with people and work to serve audiences and whatnot that um, may not have worked out on your first attempt. And it's not about this, noble struggle of like, well, I'm just going to keep on, pushing on this wall. It's way more messy than that.
Yeah.
Like we listed like a messy set of like 20 years of human experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And where a lot of that was is like, I don't know what's going to come of this, but I'm passionate about this thing, and I think I have some capacity built upon from previous experiences that I can apply in this area. Let's see what happens with that. Um, and that was another reason I wanted to share that story of when I failed on a deadline, because I had the capacity and the skill and the interest, right? Um, Everything was lined up for that to succeed,
Mm.
and that was a situation where like I let my own feelings get in the way, and I was like, this is too much work. I'm not getting paid for it. And then I like a really, this is like in retrospect what I think was happening is I let a poisonous narrative enter my mind, and
Hmm.
I nurtured it. I'm not proud of this. So this is not me like saying like, oh, this is me trying to be vulnerable for a second, Rob. um,
Mhm.
as I worked harder on this project, and it was a very difficult project and it was very challenging, I heard myself thinking, I'm doing a comic for the direct market. I want to make comics for kids. Why am I doing a comic for the direct market? Because I remember this is like 2006, 2007. We weren't in the place we are now with kids comics, right? There's like, this is pre Z to the Space Girl. This is pre Smile. This is pre, you know, um, Amulet by Kazu Kibuishi. The flight anthologies were just starting to come out, but they weren't necessarily like considered like super kids comics. Um, but so there I was saying like, I got into this. I want to make comics for kids, and now I'm doing comics that are only going to be bought by middle-aged men, you know. And that narrative started to like fester into this. Well, these guys don't even want my stuff because I've never drawn Spider-Man. I'm a nobody to them. They're not going to buy my book. Why am I working so hard on a book that these guys aren't even going to buy? These guys are just going to be dismissive towards me because like, all they want to do is, because I had gone to comics conventions with my own stuff like the Front and like Silver and the Periodic Forces, and I watched the guys like their kid comes up to the table, he's interested, and the dad's like, no, come over here. There's a Superman comics, and that's what I read. So those experiences kind of fed into this false narrative I was building of this caricature. I was building a persona, but it was a negative persona.
Mm.
That played on repeat through my head as I poured 20 hours into every page, and finally decided like I can't do this anymore. And I had like a, not a crack up, but like sort of a burnout. I flamed out, and I just kind of turned my back on the whole thing because of why? Because I talked myself out of it with something that I had no evidence that it was even true. You know, who knows what would happen had I finished that project? You
Hmm.
know, it could have been something that started a whole bunch of other opportunities for me. It could have been something that could have contributed earlier on to the interest in all ages comics. Um, but I chickened out. You know.
Yeah, that's it. The 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 connections and the outcomes and the what would happen after those outcomes, it's impossible to say.
Yeah.
That yeah.
Sure.
Um it's that sounds like a super hard project, and hard choices in the midst of um well, emotions are real
Yeah.
and they matter, and if we don't attend to them, we will be ill,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I've done lots of illogical things and continue to. Um, and yeah, it's that sounds like it was really challenging and intense.
Yeah. It was very challenging and intense, and it caused a lot of pain for me for a long time
Mm-hmm.
because it was a quality that I defined myself by. You
Mm.
know, and I failed. So, or at least I saw myself as failing. So, that's one of those things you learn from as well. And I think that's where like my interest in reflection and monitoring my emotional state became a little bit more important to me because I let it get out of control. I wasn't listening to it, right? I was
Mm.
listening to it in the wrong way, right? I was responding to it, or rather reacting to it rather than responding to it.
Uh, right. It's possible to have essentially a cycle of that amplifies some kind of thing where it's like, is the cycle learning and adapting, or is the cycle increasing the intensity and the scale and scope
Yep.
of something that feels negative?
Because I still go through that negative feeling every time I do a comic. Like that Boulder and Fleet comic that's updating now, I remember the exact moment where I was like, this is trash. This is garbage, and then I press on and I add more to it and it winds up becoming okay. Um,
Mm.
I go through it every time, but now I have looked a little more perspective and I've learned to listen for those signals to go like, okay, this is a signal. This is something I'm hearing. I'm feeling something right now. It's not the final word on this whole thing, right?
Well, okay, so it's kind of like this is a great way to encapsulate some of the narrative that we shared, or to turn like 20 years of human experience into essentially a simple narrative. Like the first time you encounter some difficulties, it's um it ha- your relationship with it may be a lot different the subsequent times that you encounter the difficulties. It may not be, but um, there's a chance that the experience and the context and the assumptions you had and versus the outcomes that happen and whatnot, like being in a room with a bee in it, it's like, well, I don't want to be in a room with a bee in it. Am I going to die? Is it,
Right, right.
do I have to kill a bee? What's going to happen? um, I hate this. uh, so there's but then the next time I might have an idea of like, oh, I know it worked, you know.
Yeah, or it even changes to where it's like, well, this is just another living creature after all. It doesn't mean me any harm. It just wants outside. If I can just
Yeah,
catch it and just put it outside, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice metaphor for how the relationship changes with it. But I just wanted to make sure that I underlined that like there's times where, at least in my experience, you don't see what's going to come of it till later, and what you're feeling right now is not the final word on it. And there's times when you feel like you show up and you've got all the capacity in the world, and something else trips you up, right? And your feeling then is not the final word on it. Yeah,
Isn't that funny?
yeah, isn't it?
Because yeah, continuing to practice, you continue to not have the final word on it.
Jesse's in the chat, and he says, "I think the word you're searching for is wisdom. It's hard to claim it, but that's what hardship often brings. Certainly, right? Yeah, wisdom, perspective, whatever
Mm.
you want to call it. Yeah, a change in perspective and a change in context in how you respond to it.
Hmm. The collection of experience through applied practice.
Right, but like in one of the ways I get kind of itchy about even talking about these subjects when you talk with people who have like you talk to somebody who's like of significant age, and it's hard to understand how scary it was for them because they made it. They came out the other side. It's hard to understand how truly frightening all these experiences are, and how you're not the first to be frightened of this thing. Um, that's something I'm coming to grips with as well.
And at the same time, that doesn't discount the every individual's relationship with that circumstance and those feelings.
Yep.
It just, if you're in a place where you might be comfortable including examining other approaches and experiences into your situation, might serve, might not.
So we only got a few minutes left for final thoughts.
All right.
Um, I want to make sure that did we miss anything that we should have covered in 10,000 feet up, Rob?
Oh, I'm sure we did, and I think it's okay.
Okay. So in 60 seconds, we're going to conclude with what are we going to do with all this thinking as we plan for 2017. But before we do that, I've talked about a lot of different things today. Well, both Rob and I have talked about a lot of different things today that you can do, ways you can interact with our stuff in order to help make the show more sustainable. Here's something you can do that costs you $0. Absolutely free to do. Just takes a few minutes of your time. If you are listening to the show on a podcatcher, I hope that you will consider going to iTunes and giving the show a star review, however many stars you think it deserves. You don't have to write a whole review, although we really appreciate you writing a full review as well. If you're watching the show on YouTube, giving the show a thumbs up helps more people find the show. Both of these free things to do helps boost the signal of the show so that very important search engines in the work that we do, iTunes and YouTube, are more aware of our presence and will serve up us as a option for people who are searching for stuff like we talk about. So again, just takes minutes to do, and we appreciate everybody who has shared the show with friends or write reviews or giving the thumbs up in other ways. And 2 thumbs up just happened now on the YouTube page as I said that. Thank you very much, everybody, for doing that. That's awesome.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Final thoughts. What are we going to do with this? How is this going to help you plan 2017, Rob?
Hmm. Well, looking back, it's a helpful way to quiet down certain intense urgent assumptions of like, well, this goal has got to happen this year. And I think it makes it safe to try to find ways to break down those goals into, like, maybe I have a pattern that I found is working, and maybe there's a tribe I want to emphasize and focus on a little bit more and experiment with. And it doesn't have to all change all at once. It's not like the new year is a reinvention of every single mechanism and system that I'm currently partaking in. It's just a patch, just an iteration, just an
Great.
update.
That's great. Yes, that's an important refinement of the idea. Right? New year means new opportunity, means a chance to reinvent yourself. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
but it also means that it's a chance to tweak and refine what's working, what you're enjoying, what you're finding value in.
Well, and the reinvention is likely an outcome that's made of smaller updates and building toward an outcome.
So
What about
good.
you?
That's so good. I almost want to end it right there because it was such a great thought to sort of, the reinvention is a byproduct out of the refining the things that are of value to you, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Reinvention doesn't have to be stated as a declaration, right? I run into this with my students all the time where I get like, I always get a small percentage of the room who they spend more time telling me what they're going to do than what they're actually doing, and I have to keep reminding them like, okay, show me. Show me this brilliant thing that you intend on doing. I need to see it. I need to see it on paper. Like, but I'm not finished telling you about the grand vision. I'm already sold on the grand vision. Put it on paper, because we'll find out what it is after that.
Yeah. Practice making it and see where it goes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny. I kind of come to a little bit of an opposite conclusion in terms of not being quite as urgent about declaring space around projects. I feel like I've gotten good at the responding to where I'm getting signals from and moving in that direction and committing to it. I think where I've come up short on the ebook is I haven't, like, when I plan a class, I carve out that space and it's protected, you know. And even with Boulder and Fleet, the webcomic, I carve out spaces for it and I protect those spaces. I haven't done that with the ebook as much as I would have liked to. So we've had some discussions like off the show about things we could do next year in order to carve out that space and turn it into a discrete project that we could share early iterations of. And I think that that's definitely a good idea. So I think that's something I'm going to take this exploration of my past into providing me the context that, yes, Jersey, you're pretty good at rolling with the punches nowadays, and you're good at parlaying your various skill sets into different things that are of value to people. Now it's time to like really plant a couple flags and say, like, these are the things I'm going to devote a lot of my energy to, and sort of, like, as the kids say, double down on a few different things rather than spread myself out over so many. Maybe the time for discovery is, this is my assumption, this is my guess, this is my prediction. We'll see what 2017 brings. But maybe the time now is for nurturing the seeds that are there, right? The things that are working for me, time to refine them instead of going out in quest of new things.
Yeah, refining things that are working.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that the project itself came out of a somehow we had the extra capacity and created a few initial bursts of effort. That turns out it's a lot bigger project. So that can slow a lot of things down and table them or stop them permanently. But that, I mean, and that's part of the process of experimenting with making things with, you know, making things in a way that, I mean, that, like, what does it, the experimenting is a way to do product development. And you're like, well, what's something that could be of service to our audience and or help grow our audience? And that doesn't mean, well, let's do exactly what we've always been doing. But yet the result of an experiment could be, well, shoot, now the capacity, we have another capacity problem to solve. And that's what I think it has been the case for this.
Yeah.
So we can try to find different ways to solve it, whether it's reshaping that project or reshaping how we dedicate resources to it, whatever.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm thinking that part of my approach will be a little bit of the latter. But
cool.
But in any case, I do want to say, it's the end of the year. I want to thank you for another year of doing this project, Rob. Another year of careful, gentle nudges to get me to think harder about everything that I do.
Very much so. Right back at you, man. I love working on this. I am honored to work on this with you, and thanks for initiating this and asking me to help.
And thanks to everybody who's downloaded and participated and watched and listened and told your friends about it. It means the world to us that we can be of service to you guys and gals and anybody. So we'll see you guys in the coming year, and we will push forward. And once again, we would love to hear from you on how a 10-year reflection or even a 1-year reflection affects the way that you think about the work that you're going to be doing in the year to come. So until then, I have been Jersey Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jersey on Twitter.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
Okay, I'm gonna kill the stream. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us.
Yes, thank
Happy
you very
New Year.
much.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.